It's Sunday. We drank yesterday. We saw Third Eye Blind at the beer fest. We stopped drinking at 8. Got ramen. Had a couple of Craig's cookies. And, all early after evening drinking and fun, but still not mentally as sharp. And this is an episode where I was like, God damn it, why... I don't even want to do this topic in this page because can't somebody else do it?
Well, I feel great. I feel top notch. I have been drinking my electrolytes. I've been taking my vitamins. The thing is, as you age, like, I wouldn't say we're big drinkers to begin with. We're more like occasion drinkers, but Beer Fest has definitely been something we've been doing with our neighborhood crowd for years now, so it's kind of a tradition. But really, Beer Fest is like optimal drinking time for me as I get older. It starts at 1 p.m. It goes till 8. We certainly don't go for the full 7 hours because nobody needs to drink out in the sun or the rain like it was yesterday for that long. And for now, as I get into my later 30s, if I can just have some like late afternoon, early evening drinks, still be in bed by 10, like that is just the goal, really, for me. But I do feel top notch. I am just coming to the end of a week off. It's been a very good week off. Earlier in the week, I was at a friend's cottage, so I had a lot of like disconnecting, like quiet time up there, disconnecting from work, but it also feels really nice when you're at the cottage to just disconnect away from your phone and screen time and social media, which is sort of a segue into what we're going to talk about today, which is why I think you perhaps resist talking about it and why it's a topic that we both feel should be covered as part of the instruction manual because it's important, but it's almost difficult to talk about because we all do it. We're all a slave to like our phones and technology and being on the computer, or even those things aside, just like connectedness, like constantly having to be on and like connected, whether that's through email or text or WhatsApp or social media with other people. But I've had a really good week of sort of like disconnectedness, so I feel just tip-top to talk about this topic between being at the cottage with my phone off for 3 days and then even leading into this weekend. Friday was like a phone-free morning where I did like a really nice, juicy yoga class at home. When it was sort of like overcast and sort of rainy out, it was very relaxing and nice. Followed by a float, which is like we've talked about floating many, many times on here so far already. I go for a monthly float, which is sensory deprivation. So Friday was my like planned appointment day, I guess, for that. So that was really nice. So as much as you might be resisting the topic, I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's get it done.
Oh, I'm feeling just a little hungover.
Fair.
I feel
if you're just feeling a little bit hungover after Beer Fest, I feel like that's a win.
Yeah. It just feels a little mentally not as switched on. And this topic, like, yeah, it's not like living in a glass house throwing stones, but it's I feel like I'm only like comfortable and confident to talk about it and express like my thoughts because I have been doing it. Like I've been, on good sides and bad sides of mental distractions.
Well, okay. I was just going to ask you, what is it exactly?
Yeah,
we should define what it is.
Well, I think that's what it's going to be based on today. Like the page, it's not going to be just like social media or dopamine and like neuro pathways, but it's going to be more so the mental diet.
Mental diet, I think, is a good overarching topic, and distractions
as
part of a mental diet.
Yeah. Not just like one thing.
Right.
Not just Instagram, not just Facebook, not just, checking the score, like following
Betano, Bet 99
Like
that
all-
Beer Fest sponsored yesterday.
all that shit, but more so like your mental diet, which includes TikTok and the news and Instagram and all those things where it's like,
How readily available you are all the time
let's
on
become,
all those platforms.
becoming more aware of your mental diet and schedule and routines and how it's affecting your life and your brain and your emotions and your motivation and your drive.
Right.
And yes, I also know, and we will steer you to some episodes from people that have already provided all the science for these things. You know, so many Huberman episodes, Andrew Huberman episodes that talk about, you know, science of motivation and what dopamine does and all that. So we're just going to take some of those. We're going to be the middleman behind, in this episode, we're going to be the middleman.
Well, I mean, as per what I say in many episodes, we are not neuroscientists, we are not Andrew Huberman, we are not clinical psychologists. We are just two people talking on the internet about things that we are passionate about and things that we feel like this could be a springboard into you doing deeper diving and figure out how to implement these things or not implement these things into your life as you see fit to improve it. However, in also typical me fashion, I will dive a little bit into the dopaminergic pathways a little bit and nerd out on science for anybody that's listening that is interested in that spiel. But why don't we start by talking about why this is a page in the instruction manual, or why we felt it was important? And specifically, because I would say over the last, I feel like both of us are quite aware of our mental diet really since COVID, since we both started cutting out a lot of news. Would say is when we started paying a lot more attention to just quote air bunnies, like quote unquote mental diet.
Yeah.
But over the last month in particular, you've sort of been tinkering with your mental diet and like how much or how little you include of certain things. So why don't you maybe talk why over the last month, let me ask you, why over the last month in particular do you think this has been something you've been paying more attention to? And then follow-up question from that would be like, what specifically have you been tinkering with?
Yeah. I think a big factor is like when you buy a car, when you get a new car, and let's say it's like a Toyota Tacoma, you know, it's
let's call her Trudy.
You know, so when you start driving that truck or have that new car, you're going to be noticing those vehicles, those models, those types out on the road more. So like when you have something, when it's immersed in you, you're going to start focusing on that more, noticing it more when you have that.
Right.
And I think that applies to the mental diet and the distractions. Like when you start engaging in some of those unproductive or disempowering behaviors, you start noticing them more in others. And then coupled with that, along with getting more and more coaching leads where they're saying all the exact same thing, which is, you know, I'm just kind of feeling like blah, I don't have any drive, I just feel like I'm in a rut. You know, the mid 20 to late 30s males and females, all saying very, very similar things.
Summing it up as perhaps like a lack of motivation.
And saying like they're in ruts, or like I'm emotionally just kind of like gray and shut off, and being able to feel some of that in myself when I go through like some doom scrolling hours. So over the last month, I probably had like 3 to 4 weeks ago, just noticing like, oh yeah, I am starting to waste more time on whatever Instagram, you know. I have a Facebook, I haven't been on it in many years, never been on TikTok, never Snapchat, no. Twitter, no. So it would just be Instagram, right? And there'd be some good information that I would be getting on Instagram, and there's some positive stuff.
There's great information on Instagram.
And I typically only follow like 500 or something accounts, and it's all pretty useful stuff and some comedians. But again, it's just distractions. It's just distraction stuff, and noticing how I was feeling when I would spend more time on it. And it was a lot of those same adjectives that the coaching clients
how were you feeling?
would tell me. Just, like the blah, the more irritable, the less drive to work out, it's putting 20 cents of gas in your car and then driving and then immediately starting to look for the next gas station to get 20 more cents. That kind of feeling of like filling the time with any kind of distractions. So just becoming more and more aware of that, and having people like take your head and point it right at that, because that's all they're talking about too. With like coaching clients and coaching leads. So
like this almost synergy. We might have quoted this on here in a previous episode, but I know one of our favorite quotes for both of us is from Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil is surprisingly very insightful dude.
A doctor.
He is a doctor, very insightful man. And favorite quote of ours from a Joe Rogan podcast he did is when he said, "There's something about that boy I don't like in me."
Yeah.
Meaning when you observe other people acting in a certain way or practicing certain behaviors and it irritates you, not just where you notice it, where you're like, oh, that's really annoying, but where you
it's
like
pet peeve,
it angers you, like you get really like passionate about how annoying it is. It's like, well, there's a good chance that what they're doing probably resonates with you in a certain way, and that's why it's getting under your skin so much. So
100%.
So very interesting that you sort of notice these behaviors in yourself, but then sort of had this influx of clients or potential clients reaching out for services that, and I mean, I don't know what your intake looks like when you have these initial like phone calls or meetings with clients, but you're saying they just sort of generally were all presenting in this with the same sort of way of like, I feel blah, I feel unmotivated, I feel...
I don't know why.
And
so many of them, like myself, and many of us, are getting access to the information about dopamine and motivation pathways and that kind of stuff. And like, there's a lot of the leads I'm getting, they are right in that meaty area of like mid 20s to late 30s, that are tech savvy and have listened to podcasts and listened to all these things. So they have the information and the understanding, but still not implementing it. So it's just knowing it and talking about it, but not implementing it.
Right.
So then that's when I was like, okay,
I need to make some changes for myself here.
I change first myself, be the change you want to see in the world type of thing. I know I'm not gonna tell the story about the Buddhist who gives up sugar.
Why not? I think that's a great
well, I'm not gonna tell it right now, at least.
Okay.
Just because I feel like I've used it up a few times. I'm not gonna do that right now.
Okay.
I'm sorry to disappoint you. So yeah, just more and more of that light shining in my face. Be like, okay, yes, we do unfortunately have to do a page about this. So like you were saying, the COVID and the news cycle and that addiction to news, that's kind of how it maybe started in the last 3 or 4 years for a lot of people. I know myself, I would never be looking at CP24 or like numerous news websites on my phone. I would never be doing that until I started looking at all the COVID updates of like, okay, it's going up, it's going down, what's happening, what are the restrictions now? So that kind of got me checking my phone and different news websites numerous times a day, over, 3.5 years ago, however long it is now. And then that kind of kept going for a year or two, probably, until I eventually was like, no, I have to completely shut this off. And like, it's not good for me. It's not improving my life in any way. It's not, learning this information is not helping me in any way either, other than making me more, like, increasing the stress hormones and cortisol and all that stuff. So just shutting it off.
Right.
And not doing it. So just clean break, cold turkey, stopping that. And that's similar to what I have decided to do with, I guess, Instagram. It's really just Instagram.
What are some of the changes that you've made over the last couple weeks?
Yeah.
And we can talk about how you have felt since you've been making those changes.
Basically, a good place to start is at night. Sunday night. It's Sunday right now. So it's like, the work, I think, starts the night before, where you're not lying in bed, hunched over in fetal position looking at your phone.
Like a little lizard in the dark.
Yeah. So stopping that, setting my alarm, putting on sleep mode, and then putting my eye mask on. And it starts at night, so then you're not already digging yourself into a hole before you even wake up. And then for Mondays, you might have numerous distractions in your life. It might be Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. I've isolated Instagram, and that is something that every Monday I am not opening. That's pretty simple, right? It's like, okay.
Oh, it sounds simple.
Yeah.
But, so for the last few weeks that you've done this, where you've just chosen not to go on Instagram on Mondays, do you ever feel the urge? Like, how do you ever, like, pick up your phone while you're waiting in line for a coffee or something like that, just out of boredom, and then go to open it and stop yourself?
I think it starts hard, and then it gets easier and easier as time goes on. Yeah. So, and doing it, like, what, like, you can't go one day without it,
When it's something you're used to doing, not only every day, but like multiple times throughout the day, as really a space filler. Like, I'm the same. I have a Facebook. I use it for very select things, mostly Messenger and some work groups that I'm in. I refuse to get a TikTok. I'm not on Twitter. A lot of the other social media platforms don't really appeal to me for what I would be using them for. Love Instagram. Similar to you, I follow, I think, a lot of accounts that add value, a lot of recipe accounts, a lot of workout accounts, obviously connections with, like, friends and family, just checking in, seeing what everybody's up to. There's huge benefit to that for connection, obviously. But Instagram for me is sort of like, a lot of the times, a space filler.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the times, if I'm at the hospital, for example, waiting to triage a patient and there's like a 40-minute delay, what's the first thing I do while I'm waiting? If there's nobody really around to talk to, boom, open Instagram, start scrolling what's going on. But it's a social media has become, I think, a time filler for a lot of us.
Something to always, instead of being alone with your thoughts. Yeah. So spending more time alone with your thoughts, or just present in the moment, looking around, watching people, having more introspective, thoughts. So, it might start hard, but it does get easier and easier. And then after Monday, there's not really it's not like Tuesday midnight, I'm like, oh, I can't wait.
Jonesing to
no,
get on
not
the
at all.
ground.
Like, it goes away, and then there's been many Tuesdays and Wednesdays where I still haven't opened it up again.
Right.
So it might start hard, as it should be hard. If it's something if you can think about and isolate one or two things that you have literally done every single day for years and years. And I'm sure that we all have one or two of those things, and then be like, okay, let's start isolating one of those and taking it out for one day. If you want to improve your quality of life, if you are noticing that you're emotionally gray, you're emotionally switched off, your motivation is low, you're not experiencing the highs of life, you're not experiencing the lows of life, so you're just completely like flatlined and middle ground.
So you're saying a part of that, whether it's social media, well, we'll focus on social media because that's what we're talking about, but you're proposing that perhaps by cutting out this particular distraction being social media, because that social media is giving you sort of that quick fix of dopamine or that quick high, if you sort of cut that out, that may perhaps re-regulate some of that dopamine, where you have better motivation, perhaps a bigger zest for life again, or
big time. Yeah. And that's where the science comes into play, and that's where it's important to understand. So we'll get into a little bit of that now, but basically you have a reservoir of dopamine, and what happens, like as you just rely on like these quick little hits, it just keeps zapping that, like you don't have to do anything, any hard work or any type of like risk reward or any kind of,
to get the reward.
Yeah, you just are getting it over and over, and it's just like these small little hits, and that reservoir is going down and down and down and down until it starts getting like bone dry. Right. And then you're just relying on these 20-cent gas stations to fill her up every single, like it's literally driving your car for one block and then be like, hey, I gotta fill up again, and then a block, and then I gotta fill up again. And that's what is happening in so many of our lives. Right.
Well, we can get into a little bit of the science behind dopamine. Again, this is purely an introduction. There's so many super smart people out there that have dedicated their whole lives to studying reward systems in the brain and dopamine specifically, so please seek out some of those other resources. Andrew Huberman is great. Yes. But just as like a real quick intro to dopamine, so dopamine is a catecholamine. Other hormones or chemicals in our body that fall into this class would be epi and norepi, so adrenaline, basically. And actually, when they first started doing research and discovered dopamine, what dopamine was in the 1950s, not that long ago, only like, 70-ish years ago is when this really started being studied. And dopamine is actually a precursor to adrenaline. So it's one of the building blocks that's required to make this epinephrine and norepinephrine in your body. So when it was first discovered, from my understanding, that is all they thought it was, is just one of these building blocks. And then over time, as more research has sort of developed, they found that, it's really important in our reward pathway, which is sort of what you were talking about, of like how you feel rewarded, and that can be from hard work that's actually earned, and pleasure. Yeah, exactly. Hard work that's actually earned, or you can get these cheap fixes of it from things like social media. But it's hugely important in motivation, drive, and cravings, which is also why there's a lot of really interesting research going on with this with respect to addiction. Also plays, this is something I found fascinating, also plays a role in time perception. I don't know enough about that personally, although I can sort of gather just from, what we're talking about with social media or my own life. It's really interesting that it's involved in time perception, because when you consider, getting yourself into like an Instagram hole, like how is it like, oh, I was just, scrolling on my phone for 5 minutes while I was making dinner, and now I've been sitting here for an hour and a half, and my night, like I've done nothing productive with my night. So I found that really interesting, that it plays a role in time perception. And also sort of the social aspects of it aside, it also plays a large role in movement. Right? Like if you think about Parkinson's disease, for example, part of how the movement gets disrupted in that disease is there's huge depletions of dopamine in the parts of the brain, in parts of the brain that produce dopamine, but there's huge depletions of it, which then creates these like shaky tremors or like the inability to initiate movement. So super, super important for lots of things. We've certainly come a long way from when we just thought it was a precursor to our adrenaline and epinephrine and norepinephrine. But yeah, it also has, different levels of it. Like, I'm just thinking for myself, because dopamine is actually something that we carry on the ambulance. You can have chemical dopamine that you run as a drip. We use it for way different reasons. Obviously, it's not like somebody's just like, I'm feeling unmotivated, and I'm like, well, here you go, let me give you this shot of dopamine, right? But it does also have uses in medicine for increasing heart rate, increasing blood pressure. You titrate that to different doses depending on the different effects you're trying to achieve. Predominantly, we use it in what's called Roski patients, so return of spontaneous circulation. So if somebody was dead and now you've performed resuscitative efforts and have them back, if they still maintain a really low blood pressure, you can start running dopamine to help synthetically activate alpha and beta adrenergic receptors. Again, this is getting like a little bit too nerdy. I see John's eyes rolling to the side. He's like, can you repeat the things about the stuff? But anyways, all that's to say that it doesn't just have to do with reward. Like many chemicals in the body, it's multifaceted. And, if the buy-in to consider your social media habits or distractions isn't enough, consider how having healthy dopamine levels is also important for just basic things like movement, heart rate, and then, of course, going into motivation and cravings and all that more, neuro bio health, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like a little bit of an introduction to dopamine.
Yeah. And that's, I do, 100% recommend Andrew Huberman. Look up any podcast to do with like, motivation and dopamine and, some of the keywords there.
Also important to note that it's a neuromodulator as opposed to a neurotransmitter. So when we talk about neurotransmitters, it's basically one cell, releases chemicals into this, what's called like a presynaptic cleft, which is like a space between two molecules for then the second molecule to pick up that neurotransmitter, and that's how they communicate. That's how cells communicate and create changes with one another. But dopamine is a more overarching, it's not just a neurotransmitter, it's a neuromodulator, in that it's sort of it's not just going to affect the communication between individual cells, but groups of cells, which I just think is interesting as well when you're considering how we create healthy dopamine levels.
Absolutely.
So as you kind of mentioned before, dopamine is super important in this reward pathway. And I think, I know for a fact that's sort of how it ties into why we feel good with these little kind of cheap hits of what you're talking about on social media. Right? So
why people even do it to begin with, why it's designed how it is, right? And why certain casino games and slot machines are designed how they are. They are programmed in certain ways to match with the human brain.
Yeah. Well, if we consider a reward system, I mean, there's evolutionary reasons why dopamine is there, right? Like you get releases of dopamine when you eat. You get releases of dopamine when you have sex for reproduction.
Of course.
So these, like, our bodies are really smart. Like they've been doing what we're doing for a super, super long time. And all these processes within our body exist for a reason. So if you think about why dopamine is there, it's just like, you should want to eat. Like you have to eat to keep your cells going and your body healthy for like fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
You should want to have sex. Like reproduction is important from an evolutionary perspective. But yeah, when we talk about it in the context of social media, you might get, so say you post something on Instagram, for example, you post something on your story that then like 30 people end up liking it, and you're like, oh, this
30.
feels 30, this feels like so good, I'm feeling connection. That relates back to some of these human needs things as well, right? People like me, I feel connected, I feel significance because people are liking my things on social media. So that is like this reward system. There's no evolutionary benefit from it, I don't think, but it's the same system that's been around for years and years and years, and generations and generations. It's just now we've added in this piece of technology to it where the same system is being activated, but there's not that same, like, there's no evolutionary reason for us to need to post things on Instagram.
Again, it's a tool, right? Because there's probably, there's not going to be hundreds of people listening to this podcast yet, but perhaps there's a few where they actually rely on social media for their job.
For their livelihood?
Yeah, for their livelihood, right? So,
of course.
It's obviously a tool, and it can be used for great things. You can do what you love and use the internet and Instagram to get the word out to more people and to get more clients and more customers. But just like any tool, you can use a hammer to bash your head in, or you could use it to put a nail into a stud and build a house type of thing. So
understanding the pros and cons of your instruments.
Yes, your instruments and tools, and to realize that it is acting, there is neuroscience there, and then there is like those 6 human needs where it is meeting your need for connection when other people are showing love and talking to you through Instagram. You are meeting your need of significance, but through certain posts and
perhaps growth, like you said.
100%.
If your business relies, if a lot of your free marketing comes through Instagram, and that's what's getting you clients and generating income, there's huge, like, so I think a big take home from this is social media or any quote unquote distraction doesn't have to be bad. There's times and places for all these things within context.
To harness it.
But to harness it.
Can you harness them and use them mostly for good?
Right.
Knowing that you're gonna, on the weekend and you're hungover, you might wake up and be like, I know I shouldn't check my phone immediately, but I'm gonna watch some Third Eye Blind highlights, or But if
Third Eye Blind was sick, by the way.
Yeah, they still got it. They're still great. But so we all, or most of us have heard, don't immediately check your phone upon waking up. Don't curl over in your bed at 11:30 at night and just mindlessly scroll, because that is digging you into a hole before you even start your day.
Never mind if you're doing it before bed, there's sleep disruption from blue light and all that affects your quality of sleep as well.
Big time. Yeah. So if we're all like little bees, little honeybees going from flower to flower, and there's way more of these kind of shitty, less rewarding flowers out there that we could just fly to and gather the pollen from these, but it's going to take harder work to find the better flowers to get even more pollen and get that bigger reward. Like, can we choose to go the harder path because we know it's going to be better,
make the reward more rewarding,
and better in the long run, and better for our brains, because through this way we are just completely numbing ourselves and taking away the drive to do anything. And
the motivation.
I think that is a huge factor of why there are so many more people, males especially, that aren't working, aren't looking for work, aren't having
partners,
aren't having sex, and are just masturbating, and it's just sucking that drive out. And I think a big factor is the constant distractions and the constant 20-second gas station or 20 cent gas
being able to get
stations.
those cheap dopamine fills. Well, this is something, maybe you can comment on this. I think this was a docu-series you were telling me about. I haven't actually watched it myself, but I know you were telling me about either a docu-series or a mini-series where they were talking specifically about online gambling and betting apps.
Yeah, they were just like casinos in general, and then part of it was about online.
And don't be fooled. Like, this is like Instagram, TikTok, like Botano. They all know what they're doing. There's very smart people that understand neuroscience that are there creating algorithms in a way that is like attractive to you.
Of course.
That's going to create that reward system.
They're trying to make the best fly traps on planet Earth. The best human fly traps.
It's true.
Like the Venus human trap, basically. There's smarter people than you and me and the listener that are literally trying to design these
that
like
suck you in.
Distraction traps
that create rewards for you, or seeming rewards,
to have the most usage of your time and to take money, to get you to spend money.
But one thing you had told me, from what I remember, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you were saying there was a specific app where, like, if you hadn't been on this particular gambling app in a while, it would send you push notifications about, like, hey, remember 2 months ago when you won $100? And sort of tries to, like, entice you back with this memory of reward.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah,
and
they're not stupid.
Yeah, no. And the same, Uber Eats does that too, right?
Oh my
it's
God.
Like,
I haven't ordered off Uber Eats in months, so they literally spam me every day and they're like, here, enjoy this meal for free.
Yeah.
Please come back.
Yeah. So that's understanding of the game that's happening out there and how it's working, why it works, and to harness your brain so you don't fall into those traps, so you don't waste your life.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, and to realize, like, it is costing many people their lives, meaning they're not dying from it, but there's no
zest for life.
They're not living because of it. They're off. They're switched off.
Right.
And just noticing little moments of of that in myself. And thinking back to, like, okay, yeah, so it probably started from COVID and news and getting used to, like, checking things constantly on my phone, and then filling that up with Instagram. And then be like, okay, so if that's the thing, then I can do one day a challenge. What? You can do one. You can do
what,
one
you
day.
can't do one fucking day?
Yeah. And ask yourself that, like, okay, so if this isn't your livelihood and you're not, selling, your hand knitted sweaters on Instagram like every single day, yeah. So why is it something that you have to check every single day? And can you not start a challenge where every Monday?
Well, and also, what do you do with the time that you're not on there? Like, nothing I hate. I know it. So if you have Apple products, if you have an iPhone, I'm assuming it's on Mondays, sometimes on Sundays, they'll send you like a recap of your week of, like, you averaged an average of like 5 hours a day on your phone. That's down like 24% from last week. Like, they give you these stats that just appear on your home screen. Nothing. Like, I get such a pit in my stomach when it's just like, wow, must have been a slow week, because it's when it says, like, you averaged 4.5 hours a day on your phone or something. I'm always like, like, that's so much time wasted. Like, what could I have done with an extra 4 fucking hours in a day times like 7 days in a week? It's it's good that it makes me gasp and, like, shocked and appalled, because that in and of itself evokes some change for the following week. But yeah, think of all the time.
And that's where the complexity gets to, like, that's just the tip of the iceberg, where it's like, okay, so it is affecting, it's drawing you in, and it's affecting your brain in these ways, and it's meeting these needs as well, the 6 human needs. But it's also just like any pattern, or
it's a pattern,
or drug abuse or alcohol abuse or behavior. There's lots of behaviors that we use as kind of like the scapegoat for life,
Safety.
the safety net from life, or the scapegoat for life, where it's like, well, if I'm always tired or I'm always sick, then I don't have to do my best here. I don't have to be growing in a certain way. I don't have to be doing the things I know I should be doing because I have this excuse. You know, if I always am staying up late and then I'm always tired the next morning, then that kind of gives me a scapegoat, gives me a reason why I'm not doing my best. And I think for distractions or like wasting so much time, that kind of is fulfilling that need of a scapegoat. You know, because what if you have numerous hours where you're just sitting with your thoughts thinking about what I should be doing, but if you just fill that up with distractions, you don't have to think about it.
Right. And that can be true, I mean, outside of social media. Like for me, I know coffee is a distraction for me. The act, less so now. I'm talking more like a few years ago, but like think about how many times I can think about how many times myself individually or us together, it's just like, you bored, want to go for a coffee? Like we live in Toronto where there's a coffee shop at the end of our street on every third doorstep.
It can be always something to do.
Yeah, so it's just like, or at work, that's a big thing as well. If you're just like chilling on delay, like waiting for things in the hospital to move, it meets other human needs in terms of like connection and socialization. But it's just like, why don't we go for a coffee? And it's like, well, what if you just didn't go for that coffee? Like that in and of itself is like a safety net distraction, right?
Yeah, that's what happens, right? You fill up your day with all these things. Some of them great, some of them not so great. But even if you're just filling up your day constantly with great things, there still might be an underlying reason of like, well, it's because I don't want to be alone with my thoughts.
Right.
And,
so always thinking about like the behavior, and then just being curious about if you tinkered with or changed the behavior. Like, I don't think anyone, or I'm certainly not proposing, like, never go on social media ever. Like, there's huge benefits to social media in terms of what you can learn, connection with people across the world, connection with family you don't get to see often, like major benefits. But just being curious about, like, yeah, what if I didn't go on Instagram on Mondays? What if I deleted TikTok for a week or a day? You know, like it doesn't have to be these big monumental changes, but just curiosity about what the changes could be and what that could lead to if they did in fact change. With respect to the changes that you've been making, I know you mentioned earlier you didn't want to bring up this story or analogy, but I do think it's beneficial. I think perhaps you just think it's overused because you and I have talked about it a lot, but I doubt you've said this to all the people on the internet. But just the Buddhist proverb of, yeah, I think that's a good story to tell with respect to this topic.
Yeah. Well, basically, there's this story. I'll butcher it a little bit, I'm sure. But there's, kind of this high up, full of wisdom Buddhist, and the villagers go to see him and ask questions and advice, and kind of just this all-knowing
guru.
Yeah. At the top of 500 flights of stairs, and is just sitting there with the answers.
Infinite wisdom.
And there's a mother and a son that come to visit him. And the mother says, please, my son will not stop eating sugar. I just can't get him to stop eating sugar. What can you do? And the Buddha says, okay, come back in 3 weeks. And the mother looks at him like, okay, well, shit,
just walked up all these fucking stairs.
Came all this way, but okay, 3 weeks, that's fine. I'll have an answer in 3 weeks. I'll come back. So 3 weeks later, she comes back, drags the son up the stairs the whole way.
All hopped up on sugar.
And she says, okay, it's been 21 days. We're back. What do you have for us? And Buddha says, son, stop eating sugar. It's not good for you. And the mother's like, why the hell did this take 3 weeks? Why can't you just tell me that
3 weeks
3 weeks ago? And the Buddha says, well, because I wanted to see if I could do it first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in
that story.
in that time, in those 3 weeks, that's what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He was limiting the sugar and cutting it out. And that's kind of like, be the change that you want to see in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what this episode kind of is focused on.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like that Dr. Phil, there's something about that boy I don't like in me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm starting like with myself with like I can do a Monday and it gets easier, so that Tuesday and Wednesday you don't feel as you're not reaching for it. You're starting to break up those patterns and those pathways because you start filling it up with better stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And after, a few weeks of implementing some of these changes, how do you feel and how has it affected your motivation? Because you had kind of started this episode by saying you were feeling blah, unmotivated, gray, were some of the adjectives that you used to describe it. So how do you feel and how's your motivation?
I feel more like switched on.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Switched on.
What does that mean?
That just means like more mentally present and like more in the moment, and like my tank is more full of the good gas. We had to delay this podcast because I was burping up a storm for like 5 minutes.
It was disgusting. I kind of wish she didn't mention that, but it's fine.
But the full of the good gas, and just less inclined to be reaching for distractions, whether that be food or phone or anything.
And what has that, in the time that you haven't been on social media, like how have you been filling that time? What has it been filled up with
more
in substitute
empowering
of?
ways,
like
going for walks, not just sitting in my car between, if I got 45 minutes between a session. It's like, I'm not just going to get there early and then just fuck around on my phone. I'm going to go park near Casa Loma and walk around for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Because your body, you're still going to have to meet these needs. But it's like kind of food, you're still going to be hungry, but if you aren't eating the shit, then you'll eat better food. Mm-hmm. You're still going to have that need of nutrition.
Right.
So if you limit the, high sugar, high processed fast food stuff, it's like, well, then I'm going to fill it up with better things. And it gets easier and easier the more often you do it. Mm-hmm. So, it might seem like, oh shit, I don't know if I can do it. And it does get easier 100%. Mm-hmm. And use it as a challenge. Use it as a test. You can do it.
Yeah,
for sure.
You can do hard things.
Of course. And if a hard thing means not looking at
hardships in the context
pictures
of Canada in 2023, right?
But I think it is just a huge problem, huge problem in the world. And I see it more and more in myself, because more and more people are bringing it to my attention of that they're having that problem as well. So then I become more aware of like, where are my behaviors?
And why are we all having the same problem?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a nice segue into something that you're currently already doing, but you're planning. We've been sort of planning. This will just be like a shameless plug to our Instagram. We've recently changed it from Yogi and the Coach, or at Yogi and the Coach, to at Instruction Manual Pod. I think that's what it is now, right? Instruction Manual
I think it's
Pod.
an Instruction Manual Podcast.
Let me make sure we get the plug correct before we put this out onto the internet. But we've recently changed our joint Instagram account to reflect the podcast. So on that, is it Instruction Manual Podcast? Okay.
Got it.
At Instruction Manual Podcast. So we're coming to the end of July. It's July 30th today?
Yes.
So sometime mid-August, we are actually planning a challenge that will run through our Instagram account. And when we say challenge, we mean it's going to be things that we are just going to be doing for an allotted period of time anyways. But we will ask people if you're interested in joining us on that to join along. So a little bit closer to, we'll set up sort of like the parameters of what that challenge entails. It could be no Instagram on Mondays, no phone an hour before bed, like some of the things that you've been implementing that you've seen positive changes with already.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to, be the change that you want to see in others, this is kind of like a nice communal way to do it together.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Starting with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, maybe the trepidation of this episode of like, fuck.
No, I have to do it.
Can't somebody else do it?
Right.
Like we were just watching an episode of a jungle keeper in the Amazon, and
Paul Rosalie.
Yeah, and he was talking about, like, I'm there and I'm watching the destruction and the loggers and the illegal gold mines. I'm like, is somebody going to do something about this? And he looks around, he's like, there's no one doing shit. So he's like, so he has to do it. So he has to start his own thing. And yeah, I just starting with myself.
Yeah.
Starting with myself and then using it as tools.
Right.
Using it as tools and realizing that the game's not really fair, just like in casinos. It's designed like the casino, the house rules and casino wins, and it's designed, there are people that are literally designing perfect Venus human traps and just to separate you from your money or you from your time,
right? Because
they get paid for
you
ads.
From your house.
The more time you spend on it, the more ad revenue they make.
Right.
So do you want to just be literally a vessel for parasites? Is that what our lives are going to be?
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of a dark way to end it, but maybe we can sum it up a bit nicer for the end of the episode, is just being like curious, as with everything, right? We've woven human needs into every episode, but like consider your own behavior, consider what it does for you, and then consider what would happen if you change it. And yeah, so I think to sum up this episode, just considering how you use social media, consider what other distractions you have in your life. Again, it certainly doesn't have to be like exclusive to social media. For me, I mentioned coffee. And then
food is a big one.
Food, yeah. And then incoming sometime mid-August, check out our Instagram, and we'll be, if nothing else, the two of us will be doing a challenge together, and whoever wants to join can join. Yeah. And see what it does for you.
Yeah, it'll probably be something about like, no distraction Mondays type stuff,
which we'll have to post about on Sunday and Tuesday since we can't be on Instagram on Monday.
Yeah.
But we'll figure out the logistics closer to.
Yeah, but peering into those blind spots, shining some light on them, and perhaps it's Facebook, perhaps it's Instagram, perhaps it's TikTok, perhaps it's even just like something that you feel is beneficial to you. That's okay. Can you take a day off working out too? Right. Can
I take a day off compulsively cleaning my house? Because when I'm cleaning it for 4 hours, I don't have to focus on other things.
Right. And that's where we refer a couple pages back to meditation, right? So most of man's problems come, or, man, human, women, whatever, most of our problems come from the inability to sit alone for half an hour or sit alone with our thoughts for half an hour.
Yeah.
So we start filling it up with anything and everything, and those things are what is sapping our zest, our drive, our passion, our motivation to work, to have sex, to like so many things. And
your thoughts don't have to be scary. Sitting in silence, they might be scary when you first eliminate the distractions, only because like anything new, you're not used to doing it. But then once you clear out, we've talked about this analogy before, but that mental inbox, once you start checking on the emails that have been sitting there since you've had your Hotmail account in 2009, once you start clearing them out, it's not scary. So yeah,
it's scary at the start, and then it gets less and less scary as you go.
Yeah.
But to realize that there has to be a huge sense of urgency, because just because you're keeping them buried, beneath all these distractions and time-wasting things, they're still in your subconscious. They're still impacting your decisions in a huge way, and that is having in the moment impacts on your life. Your everyday decision making and how you live your life. If there's a hidden subconscious force at work, you're probably going to want to get that cleaned up and cleared out so that it's not negatively impacting your life without you knowing.
Right.
We'll end with this analogy, but that's that lily pad analogy, where you look at a swamp and you see these lily pads floating on the surface, but what you don't see is the stem that goes all the way down into the mud and the muck at the bottom of the pond. All you see is the surface behavior, the lily pad, but it is connected all the way down to the bottom, and that's where you have to go. You have to follow the stem,
get into the muck,
get into the mud,
and
to realize that is really what's steering the ship.
Yeah. All right, friends, get into the muck. Check out our Instagram, Instruction Manual Podcast, and we'll all be doing a challenge together in mid-August. So more information to come.
And you can start now. You can start Monday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all.